Welcome to the 15th edition of the Jaipur Literature Festival, protected by Dettol Banega Swasth India at Jan Michalski Foundation, Bethak. The festival brochure and flyer with details of the full program are available for purchase at the information desk. We are delighted to introduce Monpas and the Trail of Buddha. The imprint and still beating heart of Buddhist philosophy, art, and culture, sired in an ancient age when monks and wanderers traveled seamlessly from India to Central and East Asia, can be found in countries such as China, Mongolia, Taiwan, Korea, and Japan. Deepankar Aron, who has been awarded the Presidential Medal for his work in the Indian Revenue Service, has chronicled the spread of Buddhism as preserved in the traditions of these countries, binding them with India. A Journey to the East. It is a deeply informative anecdotal travelogue as well as a study of civilization. Vinay Sheel's Oberoi's Monpas, Buddhist of the High Himalayas, is a meditative travelogue in images, a portrait of the Monpa people, their spiritual community, way of life, and land. Monyul, Deepankar Aron, Yeshi Tsering, Oken Tayeng, and Nandini Oberoi in conversation. Can we have a round of applause for our panel?
So, namaskar, good morning. It's a pleasure to be here, and this is the book, Journey to the East, on the Trail of Buddha, which explores, as our MC just mentioned, the cultural connections between India and East Asia in a sort of a time wrap over the last 2,200 years, with a lot of commonalities on different strands running across the whole entire Asian continent. So let me begin with this PowerPoint presentation. A quick 15 minutes I'll take of yours. Next, please. I hope it's visible, the presentation over there. So these journeys were taken to close to 100 destinations, 98 to be precise, and in about 37 places in countries spreading from China, from Kashgar across the Karakoram Pass, and on the eastward side to Koyasan in Japan. In the north, Ulaanbaatar, and the south to a place called Kaohsiung, the port city of Taiwan. So it's divided and categorized into 6 chapters. The first is we can move to the next one, which is the quintessential Silk Road, a phrase coined only in the early 20th, late 19th century by Richtofen, but has been, can we go to the next slide, please? So, but has been in prevalence for 2,200 years. It was named the Silk Road because silk was a currency of payment. And is the next slide visible? Yes, please. So this journey starts from, on this strand of the Silk Road, from Shaolin, Shaoxi Hills in the extreme northeast of China, famous for Shaolin. It moves on to Luoyang, the ancient capital, then touches Dunhuang, the westernmost bordering oasis cosmopolitan town for almost 1,000 years, and marked the frontier of China, and they had this great China Wall gates as well. And it then moves on to a very fascinating part of Silk Road, a melting pot of cultures, which is Xinjiang, famous for the Urumqi people, Uyghur people. Urumqi is the capital. And this has these cities of Turfan, Urumqi, and Kashgar, which I've covered. Next one, please. The second chapter moves along the north-south trading axis, starting with Beijing, goes to Datong. Datong, again, was an ancient capital of China. And China has a lot of ancient capitals, like India, for that matter. And then it moves to China-Mongolia border at a place called Zaminud in Mongolia and Erlian on the Chinese side, and then the trans-Mongolian train journey and ending up in Ulaanbaatar. The third, next please, the third strand runs along the southwest part of China from the province of Sichuan with Chengdu, Larshan, Amishan, some very picturesque places, and ends up in Tibet with the famous roof of the world, the Kora, the Kailash, and the Manasarovar Lake. Next please. The fourth leg of this journey of journeys is about the entire southeastern part of China, the prosperous China, which has seen China catapult from a developing to developed nation over a brief span of 30 years. And places like Guangdong, so it starts from Chanjiang, Hong Kong, Hangzhou, Suzhou, Nanjing, Shanghai, and then it enters into Taiwan with Taipei, the Tainan, the ancient capital of Taiwan actually, where one of the earlier Ming dynasty emperors ran away when the Qings attacked the Manchus. And then it ends up in Kaohsiung, the port city. The fifth, next please, the fifth chapter enters the land of morning calm and serenity of Korea, from Seoul in the north to some fantastic mountain temple heritage places in the south, places like Bulguksa, Haeinsa, and Gyeongmyosa. And finally, next please, we enter the land of rising sun, last but not the least, starting with Nikko up in the north to Tokyo, Kamakura, then you have the Japanese Alps, Takayama, Shirokawa-go, Kyoto, of course, and Nara and Koyasan, a mountainous place. Let me try and take you now, next please, to some of these lovely sub-themes, these patterns that started emerging in these travels. And next please. So we start this, next slide please. The journey with Luoyang. Is it there? I think it's, yeah. So this is the quintessential story which sums up the cultural connections between India and China. This is in AD 67, you had the Eastern Han dynasty, and the emperor was Mingdi. He had a dream, a golden angel. Next morning, imagine Xi Jinping asking today, next, who are these? Stay on the first slide, please, the previous one. Yes, please. So who are these angels? And the minister says, sir, we know it's the Buddha in the West. Well, get me more information. So out go the envoys, and they come to the modern Fargana Valley, which was clearly Buddhist, the Uzbekistan. And here there were these two gentlemen, Indian monks from central part of India, Dharmratna and Kasyapa Matanga. And lo and behold, they're accompanied by the Chinese envoys. You can see it in this painting, the clear Indian features, the monks. And they carry with them the Buddhist sutras. And along with, of course, the horses. The Chinese wanted the fighting horses from the UAZs who were controlling this. And they set up the first recorded official Buddhist temple in China. It's called the Temple of White Horse. And these two gentlemen died there. The tomes are there. They translated sutras from Sanskrit to Chinese. And little children come and touch the feet. And they've preserved that memory beautifully. Next, please. Todaiji of Nara, we now come to the 8th century. And Nara was the capital for about 75 years in the 8th century before Kyoto took over. And here there was a plague, a pandemic like COVID right now. It was smallpox. And the emperors had to do something to propitiate the goddesses and gods and give the healing touch. So they commissioned this world's largest wooden Buddha hall even today. It's called the Daibutsu Den, the Daibutsu of Nara. And to commission this bronze statue about 15 meters high with some 4,000 tons of bronze and 130 kgs of gold, they got this monk from India, from Madurai, Bodhisena. And he happened to be visiting somewhere up in China in Wutaishan, and he's escorted again by the Japanese envoy to China. And he comes and does the consecration of the statue. Next, please. This is the famous Daibutsu of Kamakura of 13th century. The shoguns were the parallel empire in Japan. And this is the first shogun dynasty. And they wanted to show that they are no less than the Japanese emperors. So they made this to rival the Nara's Buddha. So we'll make one as well. And this is again a bronze statue. And I'll come back to this later. Next, please. The Kamakura's Buddha and another 8th century Buddha, the Sichuan Buddha, inspired this creation in Hong Kong just before it was transferred from the British to the Chinese, the Tiantian Buddha, right next to the airport. Again, a bronze statue. Next, please. We now come to the second thread of these journeys, and this is that, the same mountains, the same temples, like the Char Dhams in India, are to be found in the entire East Asian region, and with same types of gods and goddesses. So in Buddhism pantheon, you have Avalokiteshvara, you have Samantabhadra, you have Manjushri. So they all traveled, acquired. In fact, the genders changed, but the gods, goddesses remain the same. The spirit remains the same. They were again in picturesque locations, like in India. You need peace and tranquility to sort of ponder and transcend the material into the intangible world. And no better place than the Kailasha Mansarovar. I was fortunate to have been commissioned as a liaison officer by the Ministry of External Affairs, and there are quite a few honorable gentlemen from the ME here. And this is the roof of the world, and it's holy to 4 religions: Hindu, Buddhism, Jain, and the pre-Buddhist religion of Tibet called Bon. And it's not for no reason that it is so holy and sacred, because The Tibetan plateau was formed because of this collision between Gondwana land and the Asian plain, and rose the Himalayas thereafter, and the Tibetan plateau also came to what it is. And it is the birthplace of these 4 rivers which have bred the Indian civilization, from Indus, which flows westwards, Brahmaputra, Sangpo, which goes eastwards, and you have the Satluj and Karnali. So no wonder it's sacred. They say Lord Shiva resides there. Rishab, the Tiranthakar, one of the first ones in Jain religion, has gone there. Next, please. So we go to Ermishan in Sichuan. This is one of the 4 Char Dhams in China, just like the Chatur Dham in India. You know, you have the Badrinath on the north, you have Puri in the east, you have Dwarka on the west, and you have Shringeri Mutt in the south. Likewise, Ermishan is at a height of 3,000 meters, and they worship Samanta Bhadra. The Samanta is Saman, Bodhisattva for universal truth. And it has a Chinese name. Chinese name is Puxian, on a mythological elephant with 6 tusks. They say it's the same elephant which came in Maya Devi's dream when she gave birth to Buddha. Next, please. Next slide, please. Yes, thank you. This is Haeinsa, a World Heritage Site in Korea, where the world's oldest book on wood is still preserved for the last 800 years. 84,000 blocks of wood, 2 feet long, 1 feet high, and a few inches thick. And this is Prajna Paramita Sutra, with no dehumidifiers and no air conditioning. Next, please. And the hills are, go on, please. The hills are called as Gaya-san. And Gaya-san, you know, I thought was a Korean name. And then I realized after a night stay there in that temple that it's named after the Gaya, the Bodh Gaya of Bihar. I mean, I didn't know about it, and I think many of the educated people in our country and the world over may not know about these startling revelations of how closely we've been connected. And now I come to the next strand of these journeys, how the art and architecture moved from India to the Central Asia and thence, and thence to China, Japan, and Korea. And no better superlative example of frescoes which have traveled all the way from Ajanta Ellora than Dunhuang, which was named as the sister city of Aurangabad. The first cave was commissioned in the 4th century when a monk came up and saw and Hallow and said, this is the place. Of course, it had rivers, it had therefore food, and they settled down. And then over a period of next 1,000 years, this place has seen close to 1,000 caves, 800 odd caves, and a lot of beautiful frescoes. Next, please. From here, we move on to the next beautiful example of grottos. This is again Dunhuang, the famous Nirvana pose of Gautam Buddha, which has been oft depicted in the Buddhist art. Next, please. We now come to the Yungang grottos. I went there as a sort of writer, traveler, China Daily and Shanxi province, and these go back to the 5th century rather, and these were commissioned by the then Chinese emperor belonging to a dynasty called Tuobas, and they also came from Mongolia. So Kublai Khan is not the first Mongolian to come into China, and they patronized Buddhism. Next, please. So this has all those double-decker caves like the Chaityas and Viharas, and in these grottos, keep moving on please, is famous for the beautiful statuary, which you can see. Dunhuang is famous for the frescoes. And now we come to the 3rd superlative example of the Buddhist art, which is the Longmen grottos, and Long means dragon. And these are near Luoyang, the first ancient capital where Dharmratna and Kassapa Matanga went. And we now come to Larshan, the world's highest rock-cut natural Buddha, built over a period of 90 years from 713 onwards. And after the Bamyan Buddhas were destroyed by Taliban in the first rule, this became the world's highest. This is about 233 feet high. And the ears themselves are about 8 to 10 feet. Next, please. So this and the Kamakura Buddha, go on please, they inspired the Tian Buddha in 97. So that's like a time wrap. And here you can see some of these caves in Alchi in Ladakh. Kashmir was again entirely Buddhist till about 14th century, like Xinjiang. So everything has got destroyed, but you can still see in Ladakh some of these remnants. Next, please. Next slide. So now there are a lot of monks and travelers. We've learned and known about Huanshan or Xuanzang. So he did this travel to India from 628 to 645 and returned back with sutras, died several times literally, almost, in the journey. And his accounts have been fictionalized later on. The records of Western region written in 7th century fictionalized into a journey to the West in 16th century by a Chinese poet called Wu Chenggen. And in that fictionalized account, he's seen undertaking the journey with a Chinese monkey king called Sun Wukong, much like Hanuman. Next, please. And there's a pig and the buffalo. So he returned back, and here you can see the Hanuman and the Sun Wukong side by side. And this epic journey to West is one of the 4 most important pieces of literature in China. And in fact, if I may say, this book is themed on this inspiring and monumentous work of Xuanzang, though my effort is a trifle compared to that. But A Journey to the East and On the Trail of Buddha, that's how it gets its name. Next, please. Shall we go to the next slide? And Shaolin, the Damo, Bodhidharma, is another celebrated monk from a prince of the Pallava dynasty from Kanchipuram, who abandons his ambition for rule and empire and gets to the message of spreading the Chan Buddhism, the Dhyana Buddhism, where you need no scriptures, like what Kabir did, which became Chan in China and Zen in Japan. And he's also called the wall-gazing Brahmin. He kept looking at a wall, so you don't need anything except meditation to acquire enlightenment. And he also introduced Kalari Paetu, the martial arts, which the world knows as Kung Fu. Next, please. The 3 monkeys, I'll come to the concluding part to take a minute more before handing over to Nayanthara. The 3 monkeys are famous as Gandhi's monkeys. See no evil, speak no evil, hear no evil. But I saw this in a temple in Japan, in a place called Nikko. The temple was Toshogu, which was patronized by one of the shoguns, Tokugawa Ieyasu. And they say, the Padma Bhushan, Lokesh Chandraji, in the foreword to the book, writes that Fuji-san, a Japanese monk, came to India in the early 20th century, and met Gandhiji and told him about these monkeys. So Gandhiji asked the father of Lokesh Chandraji, Professor Raghuvira, who was in his own right an Indologist, and so what does it mean, monkeys in Hindu mythology? So he replied, monkeys have no guile, and they're quite innocent and quite sacred. And the rest is history, the concept of non-violence and ahimsa. Next, please. So, of course, Mongolia, Genghis Khan, Kublai Khan introduced Buddhism and established the Yuan dynasty. But as Professor Lokesh Chandra writes, that even Genghis Khan's personal secretaries were called bhikshus. And they were the Uyghur people. You can see a couple, from the same Xinjiang province. And they were Buddhists. So they first introduced. So Genghis Khan and Kublai Khan were very secular. They allowed all thoughts. They introduced gunpowder, compass, paper technologies to Europe, which led to the Renaissance in Europe. And the Mongols have not really been given that kind of credit as I guess they deserve to be. Next, please. So eventually, at the end of the day, this book is about a travelogue. And you can see it is a collection of travelogues with these themes. So Kashgar is the place which was a cattle market every Sunday. It's there. It was the crisscross of the Silk Roads from north, south, east, west, right across the Karakoram Pass. And from here, you can go to the Kunjare Pass and enter Kyrgyzstan. And this is the route which Xuanzang took to come to India. Next, please. And it's got some very wonderful people, though they're Muslims today, but they're very warm-hearted. You can enter their homes, and they're sure to welcome you with lots of offerings, local cuisine. Next, please. So, thank you very much. Over to Nayanthara. So, this is the music while she's coming, which was playing in a restaurant in Ulumchi. This was Mukam, and it was one of those eureka moments I call it. And you can notice that this song is being picked up the tune in one of the Hindi Bollywood songs as well.
Good morning. Monpas, Buddhists of the High Himalayas by Vinay, Sheel, Oberoi. This is the book. This is a book written by my father, Vinay Sheel Oberoi, who was an IAS officer. He was in the Assam Meghalaya cadre and worked much of his life in the northeast. But he was particularly drawn to Arunachal Pradesh. And this book is about the Monpas, a tribe in the Tawang and Kameng regions. It's primarily a book of photographs because he was an avid photographer. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2020 before he could see it in its final stages. So he would have very much liked to be here today to talk with all of you and to talk with all of you, but I'm here on his behalf. We have a little introduction, please, which I hope will give you some idea of. Thank you. I think we'll get straight into the discussion because we have a lot to talk about. So, Deepankar, how did this book come about? Tell us.
So, Nayantara, these journeys were undertaken over a period of 6 years, from 2009 to 2015. And it took another 5 years for me to produce this book, thanks to Niyogi Books, the publisher who found the idea captivating. But it started off with the Kailash Manasarovar Yatra, where I went as the LO. And then I had this diplomatic assignment in Hong Kong, which gave me an opportunity to see East Asia a bit more closely. But the idea of book was never really there to begin with, or even in the middle of these journeys, or it was, I must confess, only at the end, the last one journey which I undertook to the remotest and farthest part of China, you know, the Xinjiang, Dunhuang, Turfan, Urumqi, and Kashgar. That was the trip. By when I had started realizing that there was a sort of a pattern emerging, which was a time wrap at the same time, with a lot of interconnections. And, you know, COVID has again taught us we are so interconnected, perhaps in not the best manner that we would like to know. But for thousands of years, our forefathers of not just this country, of the world, have really believed in the philosophy of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, that the world has been one family. I mean, in an era when there were no mobile phones, no aeroplanes, you know, these people were traveling left and right, you know, the traders, the merchants, along with them, the art, architecture, the philosophy, religion, and they were translating from Sanskrit straight to Chinese. I mean, can you imagine that being done today? Or vice versa, and then from China to Korea, China to Japan, India to Japan. I mean, these connections are happening in the first millennia. It's simply humongous, and it was humbling. And I thought, like, you know, in Taiwan, I went to Foguangshan in Kaohsiung, I mentioned. Now, there was an ancient monastery, and they built a wonderful modern museum complex there. And I saw there that there was a story about you know, the Jataka tales depicted, like this lady who's lost a son. She comes to Buddha and says, do something, I need my son back. The Buddha says, all right, you know, just please go to any house and get me the simplest grass which grows in every house called the doob. But get it from that house which has not seen any death. No, so she goes, she knocks 1, 2. Obviously, there was not a single house where death had not happened. She comes back with folded hands and says, I've understood, you know, that we are all transient beings. Now, this story was depicted in Foguangshan pictorially, as also many other stories. And then there was this story about this pagoda in Xi'an, you know, the ancient capital of China, which was called Chang'an. The Tang dynasty ruled from there, the most prosperous, most evolved dynasty of China. And this pagoda called Famensa today, is dating back to 4th century. It was called Ashoka's pagoda. You know, Ashok, we had forgotten in this country till these explorers, you know, Xuanzang records and all revealed back. But he's famous in China as Ayuwang. There's a temple on his name, right? So here was this pagoda which underwent some repairs. There was a crack in 1987. So they dug the foundation and they found a whole treasure trove of, you know, Buddha's relics and a lot of gifts which were given by various people. And then I went to Xi'an, I saw Famensa. So, you know, this back and forth, or like I said, Kamakura's Buddha bronze, and the Larshan, the highest Buddha in 8th century in Sichuan, Dafo, inspiring the Tiantian in 97. So it is these back and forth movements which really led to the germination of this idea. I thought this, I mean, even educated guys don't know, right? So, and the world needs to know this, so that's how the book, you know, got germinated in mind. Thank you. Yeah, okay. Nayantara, in fact, that prompts me to ask you that how did late Vinay Sheel Oberoi, I mean, he's traveled extensively, he was with Assam, Meghalaya, as you mentioned, but what really was the aspect of Monpas which got him into photographing them, you know, and what period of time, effort did it take, and how did he go about it, and what really inspired him to come out with this book?
Well, yes, he was in the Assam Meghalaya cadre, but he had a strong affinity for Arunachal Pradesh, which he tried to visit at every opportunity. He had many friends from the region. And for the Monpas in particular, he went to the region of the Monpas, which is in Tawang and Kameng, but is called Monyul, the land of the Monpas, the lower land. He returned several times with a close friend, Lakpa Tsering. And he was quite fascinated by the Tawang monastery, which is one of the largest in Asia. And he returned many times to the festivals of the villages of the area. And as he was an avid photographer, eventually the idea of a book kind of came about. So he photographed He took photographs in Arunachal Pradesh for over 20 years, but after he retired, he began to think about a book, and he began to narrow down the possibilities.
Yes, I mean, the Monpas, there are so many aspects of the daily life of Monpas that are so beautifully depicted in this book. I mean, that it wouldn't simply be possible in a one journey or in a, even in multiple visits. And I believe your mother also stayed in Tawang and that side, and I think that's mentioned in the book and how the genesis goes back. But which also brings us to another interesting subject. The Dalai Lama, the sixth Dalai Lama, was actually, was a Monpa in a way. I think Yeshi may throw some light, and you come from the same place, and you're a Monpa yourself, Yeshi, is that right? Would you like to, Vinay Oberoi talks about this aspect in the book.
Hello, very good morning. I'm a Monpa, so I'm Vinay Oberoi's subject, and I'm 1983 batch, so I have worked with Mr. Vinay. He's 79 batch, 1979 batch. So, you are mentioning about Urgiling. Yeah, Urgiling
yes,
have
right.
a specific thing that Urgiling Gompa was established by Lama Urgin Zangbo, who is his younger brother of Terdon Pemalingpa. If you have read Michael Airy's book, Hidden Treasures, then you will find quite a write-up on Urgiling. And I happen to be, I am born and brought up in Urgiling, a small Gompa. And what he is mentioning is 6th Dalai Lama. 6th Dalai Lama was born there in 1683, and he was taken to Tibet after 12 years or so as a 6th Dalai Lama. That's how I think the Urgiling, though is, you have seen in the photo, very small Gompa, but it has a lot of significance. First Indian Monpa origin travel Dalai Lama from India, going to Tibet as a 6th Dalai Lama, and from a very good family. Traditionally, it's a Nyingma family, but when he became Dalai Lama, of course, it became a Gelugpa Gompa, and it have a specific attachment. In fact, 14th Dalai Lama, the story goes that 6th Dalai Lama, when he went to Tibet, he put a small tree, planted a small tree, and he said that if something happened to tree, then I may come back. And 1959, one of the branch broke. We never thought that Dalai Lama will come back, but 14th Dalai Lama has traveled through Jimitang, and he make it a point, whenever his 14th Dalai Lama visit Urgiling, Tawang and Arunachal, he make it a point to visit Urgiling Gompa, and instead of we throwing the dinner, he used to throw lunch for guests. So that is how the Urgiling, though small, have a historic story behind that. Thank you very much.
And the 6th Dalai Lama was a very colorful character, a very unorthodox Dalai Lama, because he preferred staying up all night carousing and writing quite tragic poems. So he was not the most spiritually inclined.
Well, talking of Dalai Lamas, while there's a debate on now the new Dalai Lama, which has started coming in the media, but the concept of Dalai Lama is incidentally not a Tibetan concept. It's a term given by the Mongolian ruler around the time, when the 6th Dalai Lama was born in 16th century. The Altan Khan, the one of the descendants of Genghis Khan, he got an exposure to Sonam Gyatso, who is now Sonam Gyatso, the 3rd Dalai Lama. So he was very impressed with his teachings, and he decided to confer the title of Dalai. Now, Dalai in Mongolian, Da means big, Lai is like an ocean, so ocean of wisdom. And the first 2 Dalai Lamas were honored retrospectively, right? And of course, so a lot of legends around the Dalai Lama. The book also has, mentions of a lot of festivals like Choskor and, Songbums and Chortens and Manis. Would you like to throw a little light about this aspect of the day-to-day life of a living life of a Monpa Buddhist, which Vinay Oberoi has beautifully captured?
When I was reading Deepankar's book, and also when I saw the presentation, I was reminded again of how monumental Buddhism is in these areas that you've captured, how imposing the structures are. And something that I found in my father's book when I read it for the first time is how religion is somehow part of the landscape. There are chotans, which are small stupa-like structures, but they're quite small, quite discreet. There are manis, which are rectangular structures that house mantras. And there are prayer flags everywhere in Monyul. And something that I found quite meaningful is the idea of a prayer flag is that it fades. The colors of the prayer flag fade, and they become the mantras written on them, and the colors of the flags eventually disseminate into the elements. So I found that religion in these areas is it's part of everyday life, as you say. Each household has a sangbum where they light offerings. There are many on the roads. There are smaller structures everywhere.
So, Yeshi,
Please.
please.
Hello. Mr. Deepankar said that Buddhism has traveled to China, but for Himalayan region, Dalai Lama, 14th Dalai Lama used to say that we are Chela and Indians are gurus. It's true so because the Buddhism traveled from, specifically from Nalanda. So what Tibetan Buddhism is nothing but Nalanda tradition. And we have, I think many of you may be interested, that biggest collection of religious book we call Kanjur and Tenjur, which is translated from Sanskrit to Tibetan, and now which is available everywhere. In fact, Korean have brought out in a CD form also. Tawang Monastery have a large library, so anybody interested, of course, for that you have to learn Tibetan a bit, so Sanskrit is not there, so that is the one
If I may
aspect I
just
want to
add
say.
an interesting remark, Dalai Lama, the 14th Dalai Lama, in one of his talks was saying that, in ancient times, we were your chelas, he would gesturing to Indians. But now you are our chelas, because the attack in 1193 of Bakhtiyar Khilji, 10,000 monks living in Nalanda, they say Nalanda burned for 6 months at a stretch. There was such humongous collection in the library, and not just religion or Buddhism, but science, mathematics, other subjects were also taught, which also brings us to a very fascinating subject of these monks who moved from the northeast and the western part through these passes into Tibet and into China. You have Karakoram and Khunjareb, and on the western side in Sikkim you have Nathula, you have Rezingla, and of course in Arunachal you have the Bumla passes. So there are these stories associated of Guru Padmasambhava, who moved in the 8th century. And the fascinating thing is he was believed to have been born in the northwestern part of India, erstwhile India, the Udayan region as it was called, born from a lotus flower, right, Yeshi? And okay. But there are, Himachal, all right. But there are stories of his coming back from Tibet into northeast India in Sikkim. And there is this beautiful lake, Guru Dongmar. I happened to go there in 19 at an altitude of close to 5,000 meters. And he's supposed to have come back, and Padmasambhava is a revered figure. And then you had the Atish Deepankara, who happens to be my namesake. He went in 8th, 9th century from the Pala period of Bengal, and moved up in Tibet, and I believe tried to reform some distortions that had come in that Vajrayana form of Buddhism. But where in Northeast do you feel Buddhism is still prevalent? Oken and Yeshi, if I may ask.
In fact, as a Chela, the Northeast, if you see, right from Ladakh, they follow the same Tibetan Buddhism, Mahayana tradition. And when you come down to Himachal, then you have a Tabo monastery, what you are saying, exactly the Ajanta painting you will find. And then you come down to Nepal. Of course, Nepal have a lot of Buddhist structure. But again, Nepal, the Buddhism went from India as well as it come from China. Tibet, I mean to say. Then you come down to Sikkim, you have a Buddhist tradition, a lot of Buddhists, and same tradition which is followed in Tibet. Then you come down to Bhutan. Bhutan have two sects, again same thing, Kaju and Gelugpa, and Nyingma, large number. But all this has come from Tibet's side. And then Tawang, Sir have written a lot on Tawang. Tawang, the Buddhism is very strong there, but we have written certain tradition of Bon culture, which is mixed with the Buddhism. So many of the photos you are showing are a mix of Buddhism and Bon culture, which is very strong there. Then you go towards the east, you have Tuting, Mechuka. You must visit Mechuka, beautiful place, Tuting, untouched. And so for us, mostly the Buddhism has come from Tibet from India via Tibet. So that is the difference. Thank you very much.
Yeah, but I'd like to add, in Arunachal on the eastern side, we have a community called Khamti. So they are from the Theravada sect of Buddhism. So, if you go there, you'll see pagodas and you'll think you're in Burma. So this is very interesting, different from...
very unusual. I didn't know about this. I thought Theravada mostly was in Southeast Asia, Sri Lanka.
The biggest festival they have is called Sanken, which is similar to Sankrani in Thailand, where they throw... It's like a holy without the colors. It's just the water. Yeah. Deepankar, I was just wondering, all these interesting places you mentioned in the book, have you yourself physically traveled to all these places?
Oh, of course. These are pictures which I've taken myself. In the course. So thank you for asking this question.
Yeah. The Japan part, interestingly, I've been to all these places, Shirakawa Go and, Kamakura.
It's really fascinating how closely we've always been one big family. And I think that's a message in the pandemic times that we need to, feel all the more and, sort of imbibe, the whole world is one family. We have Q&As now, so question answers, yes. Mr. Sarna, Navteet Sarna.
Thank you so much. It's not so much a question as a compliment, firstly, to both you and our old friend, Vinay Oberoi, for having done such tremendous books. I just wanted to, say that we want to compliment Naintara, Naira, and their mother, Nandini, in bringing this project of his to completion. He was a wonderful, wonderful human being. I was what he used to call me his bucket friend, because we were together in Jubilee Hall in the same row of rooms, and you often shared buckets. Because there weren't enough buckets to go and have a bath. And I think he helped me critically go on the path of writing, because he had an old Smith & Wesson typewriter. I think that's what it used to be called. When he was clearing up his room and joining the IAS, he said, "I don't need this thing, you take it." And I took it. And it was my first portable typewriter. He was a fantastic photographer, besides being so many other things. And when he used to send me those photographs, which we see today in the book, I used to tell him, "This needs a book." And he said, "Yeah, we'll discuss whiskey." We never got down to discussing that, but I'm so glad the book is there, and compliments to all of you, and good luck.
I think the lady in the front. Yes, madam. Can somebody give the mic to her? The lady in the front, please. Mic. Go ahead, please, yes.
Hello, congratulations to all of you for this wonderful session. I came in a little late, but I am a practitioner of Buddhism, and I just wanted to know how different it is that what we are practicing today from what is explained in the book.
So, shall I respond to that? Yeah. So the basic Buddhist philosophy beautifully has remained what it was over the last 2,600 years, while various sects and forms have appeared, starting with the Mahayana form, the Hinayana, or the lesser vehicle, the greater vehicle, and the Thunderbolt or the Vajrayana form, and then a lot of other subsects. But the essential philosophy of Buddhism is very scientific. It first and foremost says that each and everybody can become an enlightened soul. Each one of us has a Buddha inside, number one tenet. Number two, it was very gender-friendly. All classes, no distinction of caste, creed, or gender. Third, it's been very flexible. So you see, I've sat down with the head priests in Japan, and they have non-vegetarian food outside, right? They can marry. All right, within the temple premises, they'll be vegetarian. So I think flexibility is a great hallmark which has seen Buddhism survive till today and appeal, right? And it offers salvation to everybody. And the process is the eightfold path, the four noble truths, that there is suffering in the world, and the suffering has a cure, and the cure is the eightfold path, right? And which is, of course, everybody knows, the right thought, right speech, right action. So I think the basic tenet, the core in any sect, whether it is Zen Buddhism, which is through meditation, whether it is through realization, through knowledge of everything being interconnected, like the Avtamsaka Sutra, interpenetratedness. Nichiren Buddhism absolutely is, in fact, originated in Kamakura. The short I showed, Nichiren was a monk there, the Soka Gakkai. So they say that everybody has a Buddha nature inside, and you have to let it blossom. So I think the underlying principles are very scientific. Test and experiment, observe, and discover for yourself. You want to comment on that? Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You will get liberated. I mean, I think the realization that we are all one is the eventual goal. And the moment, you see, in Japan, they ask in Zen, it's, these koans and the mondos. For example, where were you in 1900, if I were to ask you? Where will you be in 2100? So you were there, and you will be there, So through these sudden questions, they try to, in Zen Buddhism, the realization happens that, we've always been there. We're not going anywhere. So, and therefore, the impermanence realization leads to then all our actions in the best of interests of mankind and therefore ourselves. Like a chain reaction. Absolutely.
I just want to respond to the first comment. Thank you, Navtej Sarna, for saying these nice words. We did our best. I wanted to say that some of the earliest photographs my father took in the region were in the company of Oken, when they worked on a film with Sanjay Kark called In the Forest Hangs a Bridge in the Siang Valley. And Oken, maybe you wanted to tell us a little bit about how that was.
Yeah, a couple of hands.
So I first met Mr. Oberoi in 1999, right out of university. And he was an election observer in Arunachal, where he saw we have these hanging bridges made out of completely cannon bamboo, spans about 300 meters. Then he decided, some film should be done on this. And then he was looking for a person there to help him with the local arrangement and things like that. So I ended up being the production consultant and assistant director with the film with Mr. Sanjay Kark. And we have been really, he's been my teacher and a very close friend ever since. And then, all these pictures you see on the book, he would take the trouble of knowing each of them personally, and each time he go back, he will carry something for them. So, I mean, the book, the East Faces, he knew all of them personally. And then for us, it's a very, very
Great.
special book.
I think there are a couple of questions. One right behind, and then we'll come back to you, sir. If somebody could handle the mic.
Hi. Your pictures, the books, it very personally resonated with us because we have traveled to all these places. One place you may have been, and I thought should have been mentioned, was somewhere in the area around the Karakoram. We went to
take the microphone a little closer, please. Yes.
Somewhere in the area near the Karakoram area, we went to a small village, which is even now just mud huts. And it's at the base of a hill, a mountain. And there were grottos over there. We went into these caves, small caves, which were carved out by the travelers going from south to north. And there are even now color and paintings and pictures over there of these people. And this was fascinating because this was the path that it took, everything you're talking about. But my question to you very quickly, and this is a gap in my own knowledge.
Which place did you say this was?
A small village somewhere in the region near where the Karakoram highway starts.
Karakoram,
in Xinjiang. Yeah.
Okay, in Xinjiang.
Yeah,
oh, fantastic. Tuyok, was it Tuyok?
Possibly.
Okay.
So the question really is a gap I'm trying to fill in my own history, which is why the movement north, and how has Buddhism stayed alive in, say, Sri Lanka in the south, but missed the rest of India?
Why has the movement stopped? Did you say that?
No, how did it go north and spread so much?
Okay.
And yet,
yes.
In Sri Lanka we have Buddhism, but in all of India it's missing. How did that jump happen, and how is the gap there so big?
So you see, the way it spread was trade was happening through passes, and a lot of rivers also cut across these high altitude parts, right? So Karakoram, Kunjareb, and you see there were political dynasties which are not what are there today. The boundaries were not what we see today. For example, in Kushan dynasty, Ashoka sent 84,000 relics of Buddha over entire Asia. He sent his daughter Sanghamitra to Sri Lanka. And he sent his son Mahendrapal to Hotan, across the Karakoram Pass. So it started moving along with trade, merchandise, the monks, and that's how it spread. Your question is, and there were a lot of these caves, yes, Tuyok and Bezeklik and Kizil caves. And then in Kushan, the dynasty came from the word Guishan tribe, which was one of the 5 sub-tribes of Yuezhis. And Yuezhis were ruling in Xinjiang and Gansu area of China. And they were displaced by Xiongnos who came, the barbarians as Chinese would call them. So Yuezhis had to move towards Bactria part, the modern day Afghanistan. And Goishan established its headquarters there and became known as Kushan in India. So what I'm trying to say is that the empire of Kushan had parts of Xinjiang and Kashmir and Ladakh. And the largest number of gold coins were minted in the history of India in that time because he was controlling the Silk Road, right? So that's the reason how it spread. But coming back to its demise from India, I think we can talk outside. You had a lot of attacks in India and the subcontinent. Shankaracharya reformed Hinduism in 8th century and absorbed elements of Buddhism. And it didn't happen overnight. It took about 1,1200 years, and you had finally Bakhtiyar Khilji, and then you had the slave dynasty, the Lodhis. But it's survived in other parts. I mean, it's a tribute to the concept of Buddhism.
We'll have to wrap up. Thank you all for coming. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Deepankar Aron, Yeshi Tsering, Oken Tayeng, and Nayantara Maya Oberoi.